I'm also interested, and just pop it up in your chat. I created a video yesterday, and I know that I sent out the reminder a bit late, but the video is a recap of the A-SPEC overview. So rather than deal with that in our session so that we could have more time with you and present some more material, I created the video just as an overview of what's going on. So if you received a reminder yesterday, then the link for that is in the reminder. If you didn't receive a reminder, then I will arrange to post it on the chat so that you've got access to that. You've all been great. Please keep your phone on silent. If you've dialed in, no problem. We request that you don't put us on hold when you receive a call, because Telstra has this quite loud hold music and it sort of drowns everything out. But you can always exit and come back in. Use the chat box. We'd love you to keep using the chat box. You can see Kelly and Gabby will be posting things in there. And any questions that you have, any comments that you have, they will be monitored during the day. And look, I've been so busy talking about the housekeeping, I haven't actually introduced Kelly Ireland. So Kelly Ireland, would you like to pop yourself off mute and say hello to everyone?
Hi, everyone.
That's very good.
Do you want to know a little bit about me, a quick snapshot?
Yeah, quick snapshot. Elevator pitch.
So I'm from the spatial industry. I stumbled across the industry by mistake about 10, 15 years ago, and my most recent appointment with Spatial was as the Executive Director of the Spatial Industries Business Association. I'm now consulting to spatial businesses around strategy and marketing and whatever else I need help with. So at the moment I'm helping out GISA.
Thank you, Kelly. And Gabby, would you also like to say hello? Introduce yourself.
Yeah. So I've been involved in the spatial industry for many years, more than 30 I counted the other day, and very of data integrity, data governance.
Well, you're cutting in and out, Gabby. You may have to turn off your video.
I've already turned it off.
Okay.
Yeah, it's I'm unfortunately I'm on again, but it seems like it's not very.
Maybe dial in by phone. Just don't put us on hold. And
Okay.
Yeah, and yeah, so we'll have to
carry on. I'm going to try and do that.
Okay, great. All right. So thank you, and look, and you'll get to hear from Gabby again a bit later on today. So this session will go for an hour, and we're going to go through quite a number of things that are coming up for the O-Spec community, and there are some things that I've spoken about in the video, but I wanted to recap here because of the importance of those. And I'll start off by digital twins. Okay, so with digital twins, the specs are designed around copying the assets, recording the assets from the physical world into the digital world. So I would have loved to have coined this phrase back in 2002. However, that's not the case. So, but needless to say, the specs are designed around recording what is there in the physical world. And the way that we've designed them is that they are system agnostic. They can go into any system, they can deal with any business process, they can deal with any logical data model. Our focus is to get the data to the door. And I'm just going to exit out of this for a moment and pop back. Okay. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the difference between the specifications, existing and new. And what do we mean by that? So you may have seen, for those of you that have access on the website, that we have two versions of O-Spec. One is for existing assets, and the other one is the original version of O-Spec. And what we've done is that we've had a look at what happens, what kind of data you want to collect at the time when you're doing some retrospective pickup, you're doing some backlog data capture, you've already got the assets in place. So we've looked at each of the attributes to see the relevance of capturing that information. And we've created 3 key categories. Core requirement, data is to be captured, collected in the field to populate the attribute. The YR, that's yes, it's required, and you may need to do some more research, and and sometimes the research will result in no further information, so you can populate that with the default. And then the optional field. So what that's going to look like is this. So for example, for new assets, you've got this table in Playgrounds, and you can see all of the detail. Now, the way that the existing specifications work is that there is an extra column, and each attribute is identified as a based on one of the 3 categories. And you can see that there's quite a lot of YRs and number of Cs, and there are others that are optional. But we just wanted you to get a sense of the core difference between the 2 specifications. They are completely aligned in terms of all of the column names, all of the data that's in there, the validation rules. They're exactly the same. Code lists are a really important part, so let's have a look at that. As you know, you can download the code lists off the A-SPEC website in a spreadsheet. And it's pretty easy. They're going to be updated again following these forums. And we're going to talk about the API, and Gabby's going to talk about that because it's a new web service that we've introduced, and he'll take us through what's involved with that. So here's a sneak peek at what the API is going to look like. You'll still be able to access it. It'll be a source of truth for finding code, or if you want to download a particular code list table. But we're also looking at providing it as a web service feature so that you can pull it into your systems. You'll have a live feed of what the current codes are. You can pull it in to your data capture systems. You can pull it in if you want it in QGIS, and I think Gabby's going to show us an example of that during his technology session. New codes. So essentially, new codes occur as a result of feedback from the community, or it might be that we come up with something. And so here are the typical instances for change. And we've got a number of codes. So here's a snapshot of some of the codes that are coming up for that you'll see in the updated code list. And really, a lot of these already exist somewhere in the specs, and it might be that we move them from one spec to another. So for example, playground next size equipment material, there was a request for concrete. Okay, so the code already exists, so that's been moved across. Proposed codes, amenity type, the bar stools and bar tables that came up from our interaction with one of our members in WA who's doing a mapping exercise to their asset management system and came across these assets. So we have a conversation about what you want to know about it, and is it a mobile asset? Is it a fixed asset? And that way we apply it. And there are going to be instances where, for example, playgrounds, so not the playground equipment, but the actual playground, we've got an attribute there called model and manufacturer. So what we're looking at doing is removing that because it's not really a relevant code. So they're the kind of changes that you can expect to see with code lists. Now, here's our first Menti for the morning. So what's involved with that is we'd like you to open up another session on Menti and join. And the code is 286696.2. And what we're asking you is that we have a number of situations around creating code lists, creating codes. And just very briefly, we'd like to know, how can we support you with that? Feel free to type something in. Okay. Can I use all the codes for existing assets and new assets? So the source code, what's the purpose of the source code? The purpose of the source code is to identify whether the data has been captured from the field, whether it's a combination of conversation with contractors, consultants, has it been captured, digitized from a screen. So we're differentiating between codes for existing assets and codes for new assets. Oops, I'll just go back up a step. Beg your pardon, I've gone out of place. No, wrong presentation. My mouse is going nuts. Sorry. Okay, that's better. Sorry. So can I use all the codes? So for example, there are certain codes that you can only use for existing assets, 1 to 25,000 topo capture, on-screen digitizing. Can you use those for new assets? Well, no, because that's not the as constructed process for capturing the data. So those codes will not be applicable and you won't see them as options as part of your code list for D-SPEC, so for O-Spec 3.0.5, whereas you will have those options in the other specs, in the existing specs, because we want all manner of codes to be available for all assets that were existing. Now here's something that comes up all the time: unknown and not applicable. We're going through the specs now and having a look at all of the tables and all of the attributes to see where the value of unknown is valid for new assets and where the value of not applicable is valid for new assets. Because if you think about it, a new asset, we know what it is, so really unknown is not applicable for that. And I should say not valid for that. And not applicable doesn't always apply to new assets, and because we may have some conditional fields. And if you have any questions, around that, please don't hesitate to ask them, and we'll endeavour to cover them off. And and Kelly and Gabby are monitoring the chat. So if there's any questions that pop up, they'll make me aware of them, and we'll answer them at that time. Now, one of the things that comes up is, well, the recent conversation I've had with a consultant is, George, we need NA and unknown because the consultants haven't given us the data. I said, I get that. It's obviously pretty frustrating when you're dealing with your consultants and they don't give you the data. But the requirement is for those fields to be populated, and the responsibility is for the organisation that is tasked with collating this data to find out where that data is and have a communication around with that consultant. So unknown is not valid for new assets. What we're strongly suggesting is that you have these conversations to find out how you can get that information to you. Yes, data integrity. I'm going to go through some examples here of data integrity to show you what we're to talk to you about what we're presenting under these three themes. So the interpretation is really important. There's the documents outline what information is required in the specifications, and they are really prescriptive. Okay, they are set up so that you have everything that you need to be able to set up your system, to be able to deliver, to create the data, or to set up your system to be able to address it, to map it into your own asset information systems once it comes into council. So here's a good example: case sensitivity and data lengths. Why do we focus on that? Well, primarily the design of this this structure is such that it makes it easy for the validation. Now, as you can see in this example, all of the fields have defaulted to a character field, 254 characters in length. Now, your data entry may fit into that. However, that's not what has been outlined in the specifications, and what we request is that you follow that. So if we have a look at what is outlined, is you can see that the permit number is a character length of 20. We can see that the construction date has a date field. And so we're being quite prescriptive about all of that. And to the point where, if we have an integer field or a decimal field, it's all there. And what that does is it provides certainty for the asset owner receiving the data about what they're going to get. And that also leads into the validation that they run with the data that they receive.
George?
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. There's a couple of questions in the chat. Could you
Yes.
please have a quick look and answer those?
Sure. Okay. Okay, so I'll start with Shane. Yep, understand, Shane. Well, here's the thing about that. It's not about better safe than sorry. What we're endeavouring to do is interrupt the current conversation around, close enough is good enough. This isn't about being close enough or good enough. This is about being accurate and complete. And I get, you and I have had conversations before about the frustration around getting the data from the consultants, and what it may be for a conversation that we have offline to expand on that. But our position is that there's a communication gap currently between the organisation that issues the requirement for the asset capture and the organisation that's carrying out the asset capture. I'm not saying anyone's at fault. I'm just saying that there's some clear terms of reference that need to be stipulated and the impact of those. ultimately the impact is going to be that the council will come back and say non-compliant. And we want to avoid that. Nazrin, I can't tell you how many parks and open space asset classes there are, but I'll have a look at that. And if you're okay with that, in the wrap up, I will give you a list of the asset classes or the number of asset classes. I think there's in the order of 20.
George, can I just get clarity on that? Is that
Yes.
asset classes or types
Asset classes.
of open space?
Yep.
Okay, classes.
Yeah, so what's in our theme layer list in section 1.3?
Just counting them up as we
Good.
speak.
Well, I'll continue with this, and when I finish this slide, if you'd like to let me know, that'd be great. Okay, so graphical representation. Here's another example where the green is one stage of subdivision of landscape areas. They're actually grassed areas on nature strips, and the darker color is another stage. Now, I don't have any issues around the way it's presented, but you need to start questioning on the right-hand side of the screen, how is it that we have just a small portion in one stage and the larger portion in the next stage? It doesn't make sense to me looking at this data, doing validation. This is some data that we did some validation on. It doesn't make sense that there's only a small portion of that landscape area that's in the next stage. It's not how it was constructed. So whilst it's shown that way in the design plan, it's really about bringing some pragmatism to the graphical representation of these specs. So here's a question for us. Now I've got to make sure that I actually progress this question. Okay, so thank you. How can we support you? Yep, so as we can see there's a number of questions that are coming up. Great. Kelly, are you progressing these slides as we go along, or is Gabby progressing them?
George, I'm not progressing them. Did you want me to progress them?
If you could, that would be great. Thanks, Gabby.
Okay. All right.
Great. Okay. So spatial relationships and connectivity. Look, also an important aspect, and what we mean by that is that there are particular relationships that we have with spatial connectivity. So for example, the best example I can give in relation to an O-Spec feature is a pathway. There'll be a pathway and then a center line. And there's a particular relationship between the pathway and the center line. Other examples are where we have a road surface and a road center line, or we have in water and sewer environments where we have pipe sections with valves that sit on pipes. So there are particular relationships with those. And so these are actually outlined in the specifications, and they may appear as an attribute where we ask you to nominate the feature that this particular object is linked to. It may be as simple as that. There aren't too many in the O-Spec space, but they're more to do with the underground services space. And as I said, with the centerline objects. Okay, data delivery. All right. Now, I'm sorry, I'm still having some technical issues with my slides, and I'm just going to continue on for the moment. Actually, what I'm going to do so that I can fix this, I'm just going to put you on pause for a moment. I'm going to go off screen. So have a look at the current Menti question that's there. If you haven't answered it, please please have a look at answering that. I just need to resolve something with my PowerPoint. I'll be 1 minute. Ordinarily, I'd say feel free to speak amongst yourselves, but if you want to pop on during this minute and just say hello or raise another question, please do so. I'll be back in just a moment.
Are you all, is anyone having any problems with getting to the Menti poll and answering the questions?
No, no problem whatsoever.
Oh, good.
Okay.
And are you finding it a little bit more engaging and interesting?
It's engaging.
Yes, Kelly.
Of course.
I know.
I have to say that there's some of these questions that I like. How do I include new codes that are not covered in the existing code list? That's something that we will cover a little bit later on. And so I'm appreciative of that. Ability to save a conversion table to our list in our asset management system. I want to get clarity on whoever put that question. Are you saying that within the organization there's actually two sets of code lists that's in operation, and what you're asking for is a conversion table between the code lists? Do I understand that correctly? If whoever put that up could come on speaker and answer that question. Anyway, no.
That was Craig from Cardinia. Hi everyone. Yeah, so we've got the GISA select list, and yeah, we've got our own code table which we'd like to try and match within Conquest.
Ah, okay. Look, I'll take that on board. That's something that we're actually working on, and so Craig, we'll have a discussion with you offline about that. Lots of questions. Sure. I'm not going to try and answer all these at the moment. George, whenever you're ready. It looks like George. No, still not. The example diagrams. Do you want more than what's in the specs already? And can you be more specific in terms of which areas to look at if we need to add more diagrams? Person that answered that asked that question. Example diagrams are very helpful. Want more? Oh no, I misread that. It's just a comment. Okay. More consistent graphical text examples on code lists.
I'm back.
Good.
Yes.
I'll just finish that one off. So there was a question about a comment, more consistent graphical and text examples on code lists. Code list is something that we are working on at the moment. So that we'll take note of the part, especially talking about consistent graphical and text examples. Over to you, George.
Thank you, Gabby. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. I was mucking around with my PowerPoint and I flummoxed myself and I couldn't see my notes. So now I'm back. So let's get on with this. Okay, data exchange formats. Data delivery. Okay, so the data structures are outlined in each specification and they are prescriptive. You know, we've gone through how they look. right? The data exchange formats are flexible though. And essentially what we're saying is the asset owners often have specific formats and a secondary format, so don't hesitate to ask them. You know, now all of these formats are acceptable. And for future proofing, the delivery process, we're advocating for GeoPackage. Now, why are we doing that? Well, for those of you that are familiar with OGC, the Open Geospatial Consortium, they are a standards advocacy body, and their preferred standard for data exchange is GeoPackage. And some of the advantages are that you know, you can package all the files together, you can ensure the project settings are the same on all the assets in the submission, and you know, no naming length limitations, and it's a database format, so you can actually run database automation on scripting. And so let's march on with our next Menti. So our next question is around, what are the formats that you use? So let's have a look here. Gabby, if you could progress that slide, please.
George, if you should, I did, but it was clashing because you also tried to do that, I think. So I'll do that, but if you could exit Menti.
Okay. I have...
Not exit.
When I'm in Menti, I have the right question. What data exchange format can you provide / accept? Is that where we're up to? Great. That's what I get. That's what everyone else gets.
Yes, great.
Yeah, and it's active. It's active and it's going. So it looks like MIFMID is the winner by far at the moment.
Okay. So let me see. Okay. Okay, shape files, not so far behind. Geodatabases, GeoPackage, and other. It's good that we see a couple of GeoPackage. The other is an interesting one, so we'll tackle that a bit later.
Probably DWG, if I could ask that question. Okay.
Okay.
And there's a couple of questions in there, George, from John and Brian.
Okay. Yes, Brian, we do have examples of O-Spec data, and through your login, if you now have a login to the A-SPEC website, you can download sample data. If you haven't got a login, you can put in a request through by completing the contact form on our website. And John, I'm just looking at yours. Open space types, code lists. When a small park or open space is created, it may not necessarily have a type provided, so we can allocate the relevant code for it. I get that. And I'm not sure what the answer to that is, but I'd be starting by having a conversation with the consultant and whether they can give you a link to the council so you can have that discussion or not. But the type of open space would already have been identified through the design process, is my understanding. And bushland conservation. Yeah, sorry, John.
Yes, in that case, I'd probably just have a chat with my relevant contacts, say in the landscaping or similar area at the council that it's in.
Yep.
Better way to go.
Yeah, totally. And look, what we advocate in every instance is communication. Whether it's with the consultant or whether you have a contact at the council, it's about getting onto those people and asking them what are they expecting? You know, how can they assist you and support you with putting this data together? And my experience is that everyone that I've dealt with so far at council is very happy to address that. and NASRIN, Bushland Conservation Management Asset Information, are there. We'll need to find out more information about that NASRIN, so feel free to type that in and we can tackle it a bit later on. Now, I want to get on to some of the typical issues. So the following examples represent some of the issues that have been brought to our attention. Okay, so in the majority of the cases, we're clarifying what the asset owner or consultant has already identified as the appropriate solution, but we wanted to present these to you as an example of the kind of conversations that we end up having with asset owners and consultants. Okay, so this is the single biggest issue that we see for O-Spec. And there appears to be confusion out there about what O-Spec is. And, you know, so one of the comments that we find, that we hear is, well, the consultant's not going to deliver it because it's not listed in O-Spec. Okay, we understand that. So one of the things that we want to address is how to identify what assets to be captured. So we've created the checklist, and this will become part of the overall A-SPEC document. And the purpose of this checklist is to do it prior to the commencement of the project, right, in terms of the construction, so that the consultant and the council can have a look at this and to say, well, okay, what kind of assets am I expecting? And the consultant identifies the kind of assets that they think the council is expecting. And you can use this as a guide to signing off and getting agreement as to the kind of assets. Now, when we presented this at our previous session in B-SPEC, we had some feedback from one of our council participants, Marina, and I think Marina is on, and thank you for that feedback, Marina. We've now included your feedback, and that is to have the project type so that it's pretty clear what kind of project these assets are relating to. And if you want us to send it to you, look, don't hesitate to email us. Photographs. How do I record more than one photograph when I've only got space enough really to put one name in? Okay, really great question, and this is another common question that comes up. If there's only one image, then obviously record that image number in that field and provide the image file separately so that the asset owner can actually identify what that image refers to. Now, if you have more than one image, what we suggest is that you create a catalog. The image for the asset that's provided, you know, you put the name of the image linked to the asset ID as an example, so that when the asset owner receives the package of information, the catalog, they can easily identify which photographs go with which asset. You don't need to link the image to the object. Councils have their own process for storing those images and linking it. What you need to do is just to make sure that you do provide images. Now, is it a mandatory requirement? Actually, yes, it is. It's not optional. And for those consultants that have not been providing photographs, I strongly recommend that you start providing photographs. And, you know, so there are some tips around this. So let's take trees. One example we gave to a landscape architectural firm is, well, they're planting 100 trees. They're all the same species. They're all the same size. They're all the same age. Well, just provide one photograph and make reference to that photograph of the asset IDs that you create. If you're in a park area and you've got some say, some curb and channel? Do you need to provide, it's a linear asset. How many photographs do you provide? Well, you don't need to provide many photographs. What we recommend is you provide one photograph of the profile of that particular asset. When it changes, shape, construction, other characteristics, then provide another photograph. Essentially, the councils are looking at getting a photographic library of where their assets are, which assists them with going out to do their inspections. And so there's an element of pragmatism to this. Aerial image. Well, sure, an aerial image may be useful, but what we're talking about is an actual image of an object. So, and I guess if you're talking about a UAV aerial image that's done on the spot, we probably need to say a bit more about that, if you could, John, and I'll cover it as we go along.
Yeah, no worries. It's more for things like, I mean, it may not quite be as relevant to O-Spec, although things like we can capture a path or a structure or bins or whatever it is quite comfortably with an aerial image rather than supply hundreds of photos that you can't actually work out where they are spatially.
Yep. Look, try it and see the response from the council. The intention is that the council gets a sense of where their asset is and what it is, and the area and the photo may be enough information so that we don't have to collect more detail about that asset. So, for example, in signs that you find in parks, sometimes it's easier to just take the photograph of that particular sign and it has all the details on there that the councils can then use to be able to maintain that sign going forward. Pump enclosure. Okay, so I'm going to put you back into Menti. Do I capture pump enclosures in O-Spec? So if you can go on to Menti now, the question is, what is the first question to ask? Have a think about it. What is the first question to ask? So I'd be interested to see your thinking to that. Slide is not active. Who maintains the asset? I like that one. Okay. What else? What else can you think of? Okay. So we have some people that are shy. There is no wrong answer, by the way. There's nothing, doesn't make up part of the overall structure object. Pump enclosure, shed. What about pumps? What information do I need on this? Look, you are all on the right track. Okay. So how important is this? Yep, all great questions. Here's what I want you to consider. What is the structure? If we don't know what the structure is, then we don't know how to capture it. We don't know what information to gather. Do we capture it as a building footprint or do we capture it as a minor structure? That's the kind of thinking that we go into when we get that question. So that's a question that came again from a council that is doing a mapping exercise into their asset management system. And so we go back and we dig deep. Okay, what do you want to know? So in this particular case, it was a shed. And so based on the fact that it was just a small galvanized shed that covered a set of pumps, we advise that it could be captured depending on the level of detail, building footprint or minor structure. So they're the kind of options that you have available to you. Okay, dog agility equipment. are these minor structures. They're not human exercise equipment. Based on those, based on those photos, I'm pretty sure that my kids, when they were younger, they probably played on things like this. Okay. But, you know, there's other things. You know, it looks like there's some gravel there, there's some landscaping, there's a fence around it. But essentially, what we recommended to the council that asked us this information was to classify the dog stuff as playground equipment and create a code for each one specifically for dogs. The classification of playground and exercise equipment doesn't say human playground and exercise equipment. So I'm comfortable in documenting these assets under playground equipment. Let's be lateral thinkers, folks, not literal. War Memorial, another really great example. You know, I would have loved to have a Menti question. I was thinking about putting a Menti question on here, you know, just to say, well, what kind of assets can you see there? But it probably would have taken us a bit of time. But, you know, feel free to pop it down in the chat. But, you know, we see we've got some plaques, we've got some seats, we've got some landscaping, pillars, flagpoles, pathways, hard landscaping, car parking. So you can see there's quite a bit of detail in here. And it's really about what is it, going back to that previous Menti about what questions to ask. Yes, all of those questions are relevant. How are you going to maintain it? What information do you need to know about it? Because that will then lead you to the correct application of the table to record this data. Very simple one. The asset is a garden bin. Now, what kind? Now, there's multiple plants that are in there. Do we want you to map each plant? Well, we suggest not. The trees, a different story. Yes, map the trees. However, if there's multiple plants in there, use the description botanical collection. If you want to record some details, I suggest you use the comments field. Okay, now we're going to get you to do some work. We're proposing to include marine assets in O-Spec. What assets do we need to include? So we request your assistance, so head to your next Menti question and would like to see the kind of assets, particularly if you have foreshore assets in your space. What kind of assets that you think are really important to you that you have in your register. So let's see. So we'll give this about a minute and let's see what people come up with. Slide is not active, Gabby. What is there something I need to do?
George, it's no. The point is that you're logged in as the administrator as well as I am.
Aha.
So what you need to do is log in as a user.
Okay.
But I don't know that that's going to work. It's the rest of the people have already seen it and they've been putting in stuff.
Okay, great. All right. So it looks like, okay, let me just exit some of these.
George, I think if you just press escape and press present, it will refresh the slide.
Okay. Thanks, Kelly. Aha. Let me go to here.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to log out because the two of us are fighting each other in here.
We are. Okay. Okay, so let me go to here.
Just click on your correct slide.
Yep.
And then
Great.
press present.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Thank you very much. Jetties, boat ramps, piers, yeah, great. Boardwalks, gazebos, lookouts. Okay. Buoys, groins, navigational aids, floating jetties, fantastic. So thank you for that. That's exactly what we were after. Okay, area of works attribute. Okay, so one of the unintended consequences that we discovered was that when we moved all of the common attributes from each of the data tables, each of the asset tables, into a common area of works polygon, we somehow lost the connectivity of what projects, what subdivision developments were linked to the assets. So what we've now addressing is to create an area of works identifier. And this will be a new attribute that will go in every table. So the area of works polygon will have its own ID, and that will be cross-referenced to each object in each table for that particular development. Now, this is part of, you know, the earlier conversation that we were having about the spatial connectivity, you know, to make sure that we do not lose track of the amount of data that's coming through, and you know what happens when there's assets that already exist in boundaries and we try to automatically apply an asset ID to them because of the area works identifier. So we want to remove all of that noise and uncertainty, and the area of works identifier ID is going to provide us with that. So this is what it's going to look like. It's a very simple subdivision example, as you've got there. It's a combination of these three fields and a specific format for the date of construction so that it is consistent across it. Now, again, these are guides. Whether you call it Tyrone Loop, it doesn't matter. It's a unique ID for that particular development. How it looks like for capital works, exactly the same. The project name and number and the construction date. So have a look at these examples and start thinking about it. Now, this will actually constitute a minor update to the specs because we're adding a new attribute into every table in every specification. And we'll have a look at when that will become live from. We're undecided as yet, but we'll go to our community offline and ask you that question. If you have any comments to make, in the meantime, don't hesitate to put into the chat. Here's our next Menti poll, but really, what are we addressing here? So let's have a look at this. There is a request to move the trees into the open space from A-SPEC to the open space specification. So when we looked into this, we identified that the councils were getting pushback. Well, why were they getting pushback? Because, as I mentioned earlier, developers were only presenting what was in O-Spec and trees were not in O-Spec. But when we dug deeper, the council contact that we spoke to identified to us that the planners were not prepared to enforce A-SPEC as a whole. Now, to us, don't have an issue with them not prepared to enforce it, but we need to discover why they're not prepared to enforce it. And it may be that they don't actually understand that there's an overlapping function of the specifications. It's not a literal, you only provide these assets in O-Spec, because what happens when you've got stormwater drainage or you've got roads in that and you're only specifying O-Spec? We need to cover off on that particular conversation. So based on that, it's a simple question. Oh. So the question is,
That's it.
do relocate? Is this a valid reason to make the change? Interesting feedback. Quite overwhelming. Okay. Great. Well, thank you. Thank you for everyone who has responded to that. I'm just going to, okay. I think I'm almost getting the hang of this, Kelly. Do we relocate trees?
No intentional dog, new tricks.
Oh, thank you, Kelly. You're so kind to me. Yes. So, request for a new pit type. Okay, so this is a really interesting one, and I want you to I'm just going to take you through this. Okay, trampoline pit. Okay, yes. As I said, it had me stumped, so I requested a drawing. This is what I got. Made not a cracker of difference to me. Okay, so this was what I then said, have you got anything else? Like what else have you got? So they sent me the next drawing. Okay. Now I get it. So this became quite clear to me that there was a trampoline, which is what this space is in here, and there are some drainage pits to allow the water to flow from the surface into the drainage pits and then away. So it became really obvious then that what we're talking about is pits, pipes, playground equipment. So that process is a fairly straightforward process that we undertake. And we always suggest that if you're capturing data for the first time and you're unsure about it, don't hesitate to contact us, or you can contact the council to find out exactly what they want to know, particularly if it's a new feature that doesn't exist in our specs. It's always great to know what the councils want to know about that particular feature.
Excuse me, George, can you please just have a look at the comments?
I was. Yes.
Oh.
Yes. So, Graham, I agree with you. Yes. It makes sense to relocate it, but it's also important, yes, as you say, to apply that it applies to civil work. So I think there's more conversation to be had offline around that. And you know, John, yep, your practice is also appropriate. Brian, the reason that we don't put specs, asset classes into specs, it's a pretty simple reason, a little bit selfish from my end, but I don't want to be maintaining two tables in two different specifications. We want to create a source of truth. Now, in time, you may see just A-SPEC, and it may not specify stormwater drainage, or it may not specify D-SPEC or O-SPEC or R-SPEC. It may just be A-SPEC. So we're working towards that. And so I love the fact that everyone's putting these questions up. So look, just to complete this slide, so the moral of the story is you can't rely on the name alone. Hard landscaping or pathways. Okay, a simple poll. Let's go to our poll and see, waiting for players. Oh, I don't know what this is, Gabby, but answers fast. Is this hard landscaping or pathway feature? Look at your phone. Okay. 10 seconds. Sorry, who was that? Time's up. Well, that's a new feature, Gabby. 15 hard landscaping, pathway.
George,
Thank you.
George, that's the one you picked.
Uh-huh.
Do you want me to go?
No, don't do anything. I'm done. So hard landscaping is the correct allocation of that. Thank you. Yep. The pathways are around it. That's just a surface that is being utilized. Okay, is this a D-SPEC feature or a landscape feature? Again, I'm interested in the feedback from the community. Let's have a look at what that is. Do you want this to be a D-SPEC or O-SPEC feature? So let me be clear about this. This is the rock beaching. It's not the end wall there. It is about the rock beaching. We've got some councils now that are asking to record the rock beaching. Okay, I got it. Okay, so we now need to come up with a way to record the rock beaching as part of that, and it may be we currently have it as a material type for the lining of the swale, but if we need to then make it into a particular object, then we'll need to address it a different way. So thank you again for that. I'm just going to progress this and then go back to my PowerPoint. Oh, here's another one. A-SPEC pathway or O-SPEC boardwalk. So beach access, the background to this is beach access. We were asked, can we put in beach access to a pathway? So we had a closer look at it. This is the design drawing that came up. So let's have a look at what your response is to it. Question 2 of 2. Answer fast to get more points. I'm not sure how I managed to do that, but yes. Shouldn't let me knee these things, Kelly and Gabby. I'll create all sorts of things. Okay, so boardwalk or pathway. Oh, we've got to have a bit of fun, don't we? Okay.
Absolutely, of course.
Alrighty. So I get it. I get why it's a pathway. So the object was selected as boardwalk because the boardwalk has information about foundations. It has more information about railing and so on, and it's part of an open space asset. Pathway would have been stairs or steps because there's a lot of them there, but boardwalk is the correct application of that. Okay, so that's the end of that session. And look, you know, even with the technical issues, I'm just 1 minute and 15 seconds over. So thank you again for your patience while I addressed my technical issues. I now want to hand over to Gabby, who's going to talk about the technology discussion and whatever he has in store for us. So Gabby, I'm going to put you onto Let me see.
Yeah, my
Stop
computer,
presenting.
not my phone, George.
Oh, okay. Let me see if I can find you, Gabby. Your computer, not your phone. The web?
Yes, if it's possible.
Beautiful.
No, that's not me.
That's the other one. That one?
No,
Come on, Gabby.
no.
Okay. I will.
I'll go off the phone, and then it's clear to see.
There you go. You're now presenter.
Ah, good. Yes, I am.
Thank you.
Can you see my screen? Going.
No, we can't
No.
see it.
We cannot see you.
I see lots of blank screens. Oh, there we go. Yeah, this is it. Gabby, you're on.
Okay. Apologies, people. It seems like the internet my way is just really, really slow. I'll do my best to make it work. Right. I have a few things I wanted to talk about. The first one is that on a technical basis, what was at Digital Hive, we are now trying to offer you further support and information about A-SPEC just to help people cope with the technology side of things. So one of the things that we are doing is providing complete database schema definitions. What we mean by that is your IT department or technical people, we provide them with a set of create scripts that they will be able to use to create a complete spec, whether whichever one it is, within your environment that is compatible with the current whatever the current version is of A-SPEC. So at the moment it's the May 2019 one, and in future what we'll do is we'll follow that up by database maintenance release updates. So in future you don't have to recreate or go through and find out what are the things that's changed, but we'll give you a script that will automate that process for you, obviously within a dev, test, prod cycle environment, but it will make life a lot easier for your technical people. And we'll do incremental release updates, release by release after that. By that I mean if you started on the journey with the May 2019 one, and there's one at the end of this year maybe, and there's another one in 2 years' time, you will have to apply each of those in order to get the specs, but it will be semi-automatic. Okay. The other thing that we've been doing is to provide project files for QGIS, but we've also developed some for the Esri environment, and if people are interested in that, let us know. But what we do with this is we give you tools with which to manage the data integrity. We give you some generic and basic elements for each of the specs. So every spec is separate in terms of that, with a lot of automation. You will be able to use that to customize it on a project basis, and to use that to validate some of your data. Now I'm going to give you a little bit of a demonstration on that, and some people may have already seen this demonstration. Okay, so what I've got on my screen here is just a few items from D-Spec, and I'm going to focus on, I'm going to just do a query first. So if I query this pit, just drag this across, then you can see here's some, this is all the D-Spec data that you've got normally. And there's your positional data. I've just divided it into different categories just to make it easier to fit on the screen. Characteristics of the asset. Notice that for all of these, we've not used the difficult name. We've used the human readable name on this particular form. So all of these fields on the left-hand side will give you stuff that's fairly easy to understand. Okay. Now, I want to show you the next part. So this will be available for all the asset classes. The next part of what I want to show you is what happens if I capture data using this template. So we know that a pit, I'm going to capture a pit, and we know that a pit is a polygon feature. So, and for the surveyors amongst you, I'm not going through a coordinate capture at this stage. It is possible, but in the interest of time, I'm just going to digitize a few points. Now you'll see that there's a few things that the moment I right-clicked, it immediately came up with a dialog box that said auto ID is auto-generated. It's given me a pit number based on some pattern, and I'm just going to go A, B, and change that to something. Now, obviously, that will be in line with whatever process you will be using, and that could be customized.
Gabby, can I just...
I now have drop-down boxes. Yep.
Sorry, I just want to let people know that in the background to this, I forgot to mention, is that we've got some Menti questions that are going on, and thank you for some of the people that have already answered about whether you're likely to use the API or not. But so just monitor, just be aware that there's some Menti questions happening in the background to Gabby's presentation. Thank you.
Oh, okay. All right. So all of the fields, now this field, the pit lid type, you can see that the options are available from as a lookup, as a drop down, and these come out of the code list, and it's just filtered for whatever is relevant for that particular field. And so let's say this is a concrete, I'm not going to answer all the questions. I want to show you that some of these will be red or a yellow background. And that's because these are you have to put some data in there. Now, location has automatically calculated or entered NA, not applicable, because that is a default if I've got a street name. Obviously, it's up to you to make sure that if there is a default applied, that it is valid. This is just a tool to make life a little bit easier for you. Notice that there's an easting and northing. So what it's done is actually calculated the centroid easting and northing of that polygon that I've captured. So in terms of the rest of the characteristics, I'm just going to put in some data just to get rid of the yellow boxes, because it won't let me go on if I don't. You can see that my OK button there is grayed out, and that's because I have to fill in all this information. Okay, number of step irons, let's make that 2 litter traps. I think that's a yes, no. Photographic reference, I'm not going to put in all of that information, but it's just to show you that this will force you to complete data where you need to have that data completed. It will also give you a drop-down box wherever any of those are available. So I've missed something, and now I can click OK. And if I then query this, you'll see that the data is all there, and none of the yellows are the total volume. I haven't enforced that. I should have enforced it. So it's also shows me some things that I might have to change. I wanted to show you one more thing in terms of, let's say, capturing a pipe, a linear object. And I'm not going to go through the whole thing here, but what I wanted to show you is that we try and automate as much as we can. Here, for instance, I've got the easting of the downstream end of the pipe, the northing, the upstream easting and northing, things like that. We're trying to automate as much as what we can. There's the pipe section length, and so forth. Okay, so this is the QGIS automation and validation tools. There's a whole bunch of those. I have had some requests for people saying we've got to produce a little bit more, a little bit of a flyer. So I will go and generate a flyer, and I will submit that, or we'll distribute it for people, make it available on the website. Okay, George, how am I doing for time? I think I've taken a bit long on that one.
Yeah, it's great. 11:28.
Okay.
Fire away, Gabby.
Okay. Next one is the codeless API. George has spoken about codeless. One of the questions for some of the people have actually asked questions about how can we get code lists or those sorts of things easier. And so we've made it available as a web service. There is different APIs actually available. There's a number of APIs in the back end. One of them is a maintenance process that allow us to edit online the code, edit the code lists online. And what that could mean for some councils is if you have your own code list, you can use the service to create a mapping code list and make that available. But for the rest of us, we make the code list available so that people can get the latest and greatest code list online. And at that point, I'm going to go and actually show you the code list. So here is an online version that shows us the code list. I'm not going to go into everything. There's an uploader for people who want to upload their own codes. This is a publicly available one, and I'm going to spend a little bit of time on that. And this one here shows you the corporate one, the one that is available. Is available for managing your own code lists online. So there is a separate user interface for that. But going back to the actual code list, publicly available one. If I wanted to find a code list that's available in B-SPEC, all I need to do is go into the specification and I just type a B and it immediately filters everything and I've got that. If I don't have to know what the code list is called. If I know a part of the code list, I can just type in a few words. You can see I've typed in status, and there's the asset status for B-SPEC, and you get all the codes there.
Gabby, can I interrupt you?
Yes, sir.
Could you do it for O-Spec, please?
Go.
O-Spec.
Oh, sorry. Good point, George. Okay, I'll do the whole thing there. So similar. All right. If there is something that I just wanted to go through to this part. Let's say there's something I'm looking for. I'll keep the filter to O-Spec there. If I'm looking for, I'll use the concrete example again. If I want to know what are the concretes available within O-Spec, and there's all the codes that's got concrete available, and I can go and filter in a number of ways. I can take whatever filter up, I can copy it, I can create a CSV or a PDF document to download that code list. So so fairly flexible. Now, this is the website, the web side of things. But what you will be able to do from within your organization is to actually download this as a, or not download this as a web service, or link your databases to this so that you always have the latest and the most accurate, up-to-date code list available to people within the organization. You don't have to go and download and put the data in a database. What you do is you set up a link to the API, and then it's made available to people's devices all in one go. Okay. Now I've got a Menti on this, George. If you could show us that. Oh no, you can't. It's okay. You've got the Menti active. George?
Sorry, I was busy talking.
It's all right. You know what?
Is it, how do you currently refresh the code list? Is that the question?
That's the question I wanted to know. Don't show it. Just talk to me about that.
Okay. So we have download from A-SPEC website. Someone else downloads the list for me. I don't know. So we have 8 responses. Download the A-SPEC from A-SPEC website. 4 responses,
Okay.
someone else downloads, and 2, I don't know.
All right. So very often for people, code list is just a bit of a black box. And so what we want to do is we want to, it's probably a little bit black boxy still, but we want to make it available, for the technical people as that web service, but for any of you who want to look up a code, especially if you're out in the field and you don't know what the right code is for a particular item that you're looking for, there is an alternative. You can go and download it in real time. Okay. The next part I want to talk about is we're busy with the development of a new construction image capture API. We've got the basic one already there. You know that for all assets now, you have to submit photos. George has just spoken about it. And there's still a lot of confusion about what to do, how to do it. And what we're trying to do with this particular API is to allow you to capture in real time in the field using your phone app or a website that will provide data, the photo data, linked to a location. If you have the ID that you're going to be assigning, you can use that, and then you can use that to link the images that you've taken. And I've captured one at home. Here is a form, the form that's available that we're making available online, and you can see that I have drop-down boxes with a few things in here that that's automatically populated, or that that's not automatic, that I have to go and populate. The date and time will automatically, it'll take the date and the time of the photo. And in terms of photographer, if I select the photographer here, well, I can't do that at the moment unless I delete it. So if I select Gabby, it'll automatically populate my affiliation company and various other things. A little bit more complex, also somewhat customizable, but what we're trying to do is provide 3 or 4 fields that can very easily be used to capture a photo, also multiple photos. So here's just a photo of a pond, but it makes it easy for people to capture this sort of thing in the field. Right, enough about that. My last slide. We are offering a bunch of courses on QGIS. You would have seen some of this already. We've got a basic introduction to QGIS, an advanced QGIS course, and then specifically how can you use QGIS to capture data. That's not using the automation that I just showed, but helping you to do your own stuff. We also can talk about automation with Python if anybody is interested in terms of QGIS training. Then on the A-SPEC side, we are working on training on actually how to use the specs, overview of understanding the specs, what the asset class relationships are. A lot of people have some confusion about asset class relationships, and so we want to put something together, or we're in the process of putting something together that'll make that easy for people. And finally, we're working on a certification program. The certification program will be a national program. Our intent is to make it available as a VET, a vet program that's obviously linked to the Australian qualifications framework. So if you have an application, if you have a qualification and you want to expand, this could actually count towards a further qualification for you. That's something that we're working on at the moment, and so watch that space. I guess what I'd like to know is if anybody's interested in, especially the certification program, that you let us know. George, now I know that I had one or two other mentees.
Yep,
perhaps
they're going on in the background.
You can take.
But there's a question from Craig
Okay.
Jones, and he'd like to
Yes.
know more about how to link the API code list to the GIS tables.
Okay. Craig, I'm not going to answer it here, but what I'll do is I'll have a session with which I work on that. In fact, I'll get in touch with you afterwards. George, you've got the contact details?
Yep. Yes.
Okay. And I can give you some more details about that. All right. Any other questions? Then I'm done.
Wow. Awesome. I'm going to take the screen back then. Thank you, Gabby.
Yep.
Alrighty. So let me see how we go here. Okay. So what I'm going to do is just a very brief recap of the responses that people made in relation to the Menti that was going on in the background. And so if you haven't answered already, feel free to answer it. So at the moment, how likely are you use a code list? So so we've got some good responses there. Everything from I won't use it all to being out in the field. So obviously, really important to get that connectivity happening out onto a device, in the field, downloaded on a device or live on a connected device. I think that's really great. Desktop, can see the real opportunity there for embedding it into asset management systems or even GIS environments there. So thank you for the people that responded. We had 17 people respond, so that was great. The next one that we had, next question going on the background was, how do you currently refresh the code list codes? And these are the responses. Again, we have 17 people respond, so that seems to be the magic number. I love it. So thank you again. Oh, now 18. Okay, so we can see there's quite a lot of activity off the website, which is great because we openly promote that you can download it. Now, you'll still be able to download it if you want. However, going through into the API is all about, you know, the convenience of not having to download it. The next question that we asked was, I want to see more of data validation, data capture, neither. Okay, great. So we've got a number of responses there around the data validation, and which I think is really great because the kind of maturity that we've got, that we're experiencing in our group, is heavily focused on the data integrity side. So, as we spoke about earlier, the elements for data integrity are around the interpretation of the specs. The PDFs are a rich source of how to capture stuff. They don't capture everything, right? But what's really important is that if it's not there, go to a committed colleague, go to somebody that you can actually ask that question as a source for you, whether it's GISA, whether it's myself, whether it's Gabby, whether it's somebody else, someone at council, or from council coming to us. We're happy to answer those. And the next one was around what software to use. So again, thank you. MS Access, Global Mapper, so Excel. We've got a good range of products that are being used there. Okay, and you can see that I think the way this works is that I thought the most popular one is the most prominent one. Is that the way it works, Gabby?
Yes. Can you hear me, George?
I can. So QGIS
Okay.
and MapInfo are the two most prominent ones.
Yeah.
I see my old favourite of MicroStation is there. I used to love using that. Wouldn't know what it looks like.
I'm surprised how big it is.
Yeah.
And I'm surprised. I'm surprised to see that AutoCAD doesn't feature more. It's interesting.
Yes, it is interesting, particularly with the number of organisations that are using the portal, the ACDC portal.
Yeah.
Yep. Cool.
Yep.
Thank you. So good number of responses there. 20 people.
Yep.
The next thing was something for you, really, like anything you would like covered that we have not so far. So, I'm going to take on the next session. But what I'm going to do is I'll leave that question open. So if you have anything there, and really we've covered a lot of territory. There's a lot of things that have been addressed, and there could be some things that were important to you or of interest to you that we haven't addressed. Put those into the questions. Gabby and Kelly are monitoring those while I'm doing my presentation. So I'm going to pop back onto the wrap-up session. Okay, so this session, and that's what what the Menti question is. What have we covered, or what do you want us to cover that we haven't covered so far? Alrighty. So, empowering you in communication. What does that actually mean? So, if we're talking about a certification process, is that the same as what Gabby's talking? No, it's not. What Gabby's talking about is having our training program certified. What I'm talking about here is having it's like a quality assurance process that deals with communication. We're talking about the power of communication between the asset owner and the data provider. Now, there's very little that we've spoken about in technology, and as you all know, it's not about selling you the A-SPEC. There is no A-SPEC software. Even the tools that Gabby has created, you know, the APIs, it's about convenience. The tips in QGIS are again about streamlining the way that you capture data and you validate the processes. And look, and there's more that can be done around that to put in ranges of appropriate entries and all of that, and that's Gabby's areas of expertise. But what I'm talking about here is communication between parties. And this will operate at two levels, at an organisation level and an individual level. And what do I mean by that? Well, what I mean is it will have a dual focus. It will address how communication by an asset owner for items such as non-compliance occurs and is passed on to the data provider or the consultant, and how does the data provider address issues such as non-compliance. You know, you may have heard me relate this story previously if you've been at other the face-to-face forums, but I had a situation a couple of years ago in WA where a consultant was delivering data to a council, and the council said, "No, reject. You need to fix it up." After the third submission and the third rejection, the council said, "No, look, go talk to George because this clearly isn't working. Your data is not acceptable." And the consultant got their back up a bit and said that, well, you know, other councils are accepting my data, so I don't know what the problem with you is. And it started spiraling to not a great place. So I was in contact with the council and asked them if they'd like me to address what's going on. They said yes. So I spoke to the consultant. I was a surveying consultant. I said, look, you know, do you want me to have a, I'm aware of what's going on. Thanks for keeping me in the loop with your emails. Do you want me to start addressing this? And they said, yes, please, because I'm at my wit's end. I'm going to go to the Minister for Small Business, and, you know, it's a restraint of trade. You know, they're just dealing with me unfairly. So I had a look at the data, and I rang the consultant back and I said, I've got some good news and some bad news for you. And he said, okay, what's that? And I said, well, the good news is I've seen all the data. He said, okay. I said, the bad news is I've found more non-compliance. He said, well, how can that be? I said, well, there are things that the council has not been picking up. And I spoke to the council, and I didn't tell this to the consultant, but I spoke to the council and they said, oh yeah, we just don't have time. You know, we're getting smashed with data. I'm just doing the cursory stuff and they should know it anyway. So I, on my next trip to WA, I sat down with the consultant and their main surveyor, and we had a look at their data. And it was one of the issues, the main issue was that everything was coming out as text fields. It was a trap for young players at the time. So we identified that, and they were able to have a look at their export function and resolve it, basically from a 5-minute conversation. But until that was pointed out to them, they had no idea what was going on. So they're the kind of things that we're looking to address. So that's what I wanted to talk to you about this certification process. And this will be an ongoing conversation, and it'll be mentioned at the other forums as well, and also at the showcase. If you have any questions, you know, please fill in, you know, put it in the Menti poll or in the chat room. It'd be great. Okay. So what's next and when? Well, the next A-SPEC and QGIS courses are actually running tomorrow and Thursday. And there's still and we run them to, or Gabby runs them to a maximum of 6 people. We currently have 2 people on it, I think. And so if you want to book yourself in, just go to the Digital Hive website and you can do that. API code list release. Gabby, I'm going to let you off the hook. You thought it was the end of September. We've actually said end of November or November. So, so no stressing about that. It's just we've got a little bit of time, but I think we're well placed to be able to do that. And Kelly has just posted on the chat room the Digital Hive address. Okay, next release of updates. Now, at this stage, we're talking probably next major release, 2021. Now, we've spoken about the introduction of this new attribute for all of the tables for the area of works ID. We will wait until we complete these forums, so mid-October, and then we'll prepare for possibly at the end of November or midway through December to address that. And but our plan is that we don't even want to put out addendums, but if you think that an addendum would make a difference, then please let me know. My sense of it is that addendums can be missed, and this is too critical an aspect when you're introducing a new attribute to put that in an addendum. So what we're also mindful of is the impact that it has on organizations, the software vendors, and incorporating it into their schema, and for the councils to incorporate it into their data schemas as well, into their asset management systems or their GIS environments. So whilst we may introduce it in November, what we'll do is we'll have a grace-in period of probably 2 to 3 months, and then there'll be a sunset clause for when it's required to be included in the submissions. Again, if you want to make a comment about that in your questions on the Menti poll, please don't hesitate to do that. Just before I go on to the next thing, there's a couple of other things I wanted to pick up on. Nazrin asked about the number of asset classes, so I just want to clarify that in the table on section 1.3 there is 25 asset classes, and now I also want to reinforce that our asset class may be made up of different kinds of asset types to minimize the number of tables. So in effect, we need to be clear. Are you talking about asset types, Nazrin, or are you talking about asset classes? Because if we're talking about asset types, then there's probably 100 or so asset types that are covered. Our intention is get the data to the door. You then manage it to put it into your schema so that it meets with your data model. That is the intention of that. So the A-SPEC certification process by June 30, 2021. That means that we will have a process in place to be able to start the certification process. And what will occur is that we understand that whilst an organisation delivers data, it really comes down to the experience and skills of the individuals. So we want to. So there may So what we're now considering is, okay, at an organisational level, who is the key person responsible for that kind of interaction? And then are there specific individuals who report to that key person that would deal with the non-compliance issues or other issues? So we're looking at how we can make that workable, given that people come and go from organisations, although that's not happening at the moment, but that's the typical scenario. More APIs are planned. Gabby spoke about delivering the data through an API mechanism, a web service, and it's planned for June 2021. We're also looking at, well, what kind of commercial model do we put in place there? You know, is it going to be similar to how the subscriptions occur now? You know, it opens up a whole new paradigm about how we deal with organisations outside of our traditional area of dealing directly with councils and water authorities. Okay, so the next A-SPEC forum is on next Tuesday, 15th, which is the A-SPEC forum. Yes, same time, and we will be using this kind of scenario to be able to interact with you. The interaction has been great, and I just want to bring on to the screen one of the questions that's come up is, how does council identify non-compliance? Well, I'll go to that one in a moment. How does council identify non-compliance when they are short on resources to keep up with submissions? Well, this is one of the key things that we talk to councils about around. It's not likely that you can get any more staff. So what is it that you're doing internally that can actually be streamlined, can be automated? And our intention is to keep those conversations going and to be a source to those councils to give them some ideas, maybe even do some work for them. It just depends what they want, so that they do not end up being a bottleneck for non-compliance issues or for any issue. So that will actually be...
George, just
Gabby?
George, sorry, just very quickly, Nasrin has made an extra comment or clarification in terms of his question. Maybe you want to have a look at that.
Yep. Okay. Yes, I will. Okay. Thanks, Nasrin.
Okay.
For coming back.
He's also going running out, I think.
She.
No, he's not.
She.
I'm sorry. She.
That's okay. Yep. Okay. How competent GISA to be able to certify councils, asset teams, surveyors and engineers? That's a really good question. I guess it depends on your definition of competency. We're confident that we can create a process that deals with communication and addresses why communication fails and what is the optimal way to communicate and resolve issues. We're not going to tell you about how to do your job. We're not going to tell you about, oh, you know, you should do a verification survey instead of doing a full feature survey, or the asset team, I think you should, you know, you should determine the criticality of this asset this way. No, that's not what we're about. We are about communicating. And it's not actually about talking. Our definition of communication is about asking questions. Everything can be resolved in communication. That's our philosophy. So that's the way that we're going to approach it. Okay. So given that it's 12:01, the showcase, the last Menti. I know that I've gone over for a minute, but I've appreciate your patience. So the last Menti question, and it's a really quick one. It'll take you 30 seconds to fill this out, and then we can get a sense of what it was like. Okay. So thank you very much to everybody who has participated in this. This has been a brand new venture for us. Thank you, Kelly and Gabby, for taking me down this path. It's been, I've actually really enjoyed it. Been a big learning curve, but yes, this old dog has learnt some new tricks today, and we plan to put that into play for the next one. And I just want to leave you with this slide. It's my favorite slide. Without data, you're just another person with an opinion.